Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Breaking Free from Churchianity. Thanks for joining me today. We have a special guest who is going to share her deconstruction journey. Cheryl Burns is someone who has gone through our Steps to Thriving program, and someone I've had a chance to know for about 4 years now. And I think her story is something that many of you will be able to relate to. Cheryl's someone who has come out of the evangelical background. She came out of the evangelical church and has had to go through a deconstruction process later in life. And I think her story will be something that not only people can appreciate, but for some of you, maybe you're just starting, maybe you're just beginning to do this. And regardless of your age, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to deconstruct. It's a challenge to go back and look at your theology to see what is it I actually believe? What is it that I really need to tear down, if you will, to the studs and reevaluate and determine for myself how I feel about it. And so I think by examining other people's stories, by looking at other people's stories, that it's an opportunity not only for encouragement for us to do this, but it's also possible for us to look at their stories and see ourselves. My hope is that as you listen to her story, it'll be an encouragement to you as you go through your own deconstruction process and realize that regardless of where we're at in life, how old we are, how young we are, each of us is on a journey and each of us can do this with the assistance of the Holy Spirit. So I hope you enjoy the conversation with Cheryl Burns. All right, I'm here with Cheryl Burns, who is gone through our Steps to Thriving program and has been doing her own deconstruction process. And I had asked Cheryl, I guess a month or two ago, if she'd be willing to just come on and talk a little bit about her experience. I think this is important just because other people can relate to your experience. And so as we do this interviews, and I hope to do more of these interviews going forward with other people. I know we've got a few people that are interested in this as well. But I look forward to you hearing Cheryl's story because I think her story is something that many of you can relate to. So I encourage you to listen to it all. This may end up being a two-parter. If it is, please watch both because I do think this you're going to get some things out of this that you can really relate to. So Cheryl, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. It's such
Okay.
a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really do. Thank you for spending some time with me. So I thought we'd do just start out, just tell us a little bit about your background, kind of your religious upbringing, just to give people some context. Let's just start there.
Okay. Well, I was raised in a very strict home, evangelical home. My mom and dad were highly involved in our church, and they raised us. From birth, we were like third generation in this particular denomination. And the upbringing was that my dad ruled. He was the dictator. Born in the 50s, dads ruled everything, and everything they said went. We were taught not to have an opinion. We could not ask a question. We were just to obey and do what we were told. And so when it came to church, we did the same thing. We followed the pastor's teachings, no matter what they were, without question. And that's just the way it was. We were not to go against that. We couldn't go against that. We were also taught to fear, and we were afraid of my father was horribly afraid of my dad, and did not ask questions or go against any of the teachings of the church. We just did it. So, in growing up as a teenager, my father began to question a few things. Some things didn't make sense, and he began to come against some of the church, and so he was kind of not accepted by them any longer. And so he quit going, and he became very, I would say, he questioned everything. And so he questioned God, he questioned the teachings, he questioned us kids, he drilled us before we went to our youth meetings and all that. And so there was kind of this conflict in the family as a teenager. But when I left home, I graduated from high school and I went right into our church college in Kansas City, which further indoctrinated me into the religion. And while I was there, I got to see the cruelty of religion. I got to see students judging other students, ostracizing them because of things that they had done, they found out they had done in their past, or a belief system they had that didn't match. I myself came under, their scrutiny and their judgment because of my dad and some of the things that I had been raised in as a teenager. But I went ahead and married out of that. And I'd like to say that I didn't ask questions I'd like to say that I asked questions and that I was ready to deconstruct or come out of that religion after college, but I didn't. Fear, of course, was right at the basis of your thinking. I had to stay in a church. I had to find a church body somewhere. The drive to just stay in that doctrination drove me. As the years passed, I began to question the belief system that I was raised in. There was things that didn't make sense, like losing your salvation. I didn't know how that could be. The church was very cruel to my family they felt that my dad had, was a backslider, and they treated him as such, and they ostracized him. And I didn't understand all that. I was hurt for him, was hurt from my mom. But it just caused me to drive deeper and to create that God that I could control, to make him something that, I could tell him what to do. That was a safety for me.
Right.
And, that only drives you for more anger. I had a lot of bitterness and a lot of anger about things that had happened as a child, things I didn't understand, things I did. The why me, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? That kind of stuff. But I always, throughout all the crisis and the things that I went through, I desired a relationship with God. I wanted so much for him to love me. I didn't know that he loved me. I looked at myself as, that I had something wrong with me, that I was never going to be good enough. When I would try to live the Christian life, I would constantly fail. And I was constantly repenting and rededicating and trying new things, and Bible studies and women's conferences, and just, trying to get God's attention, trying to understand who I was, how can I be good enough? What do I need to do, God, for you to love me? I just, I don't understand, I just knew that he was a God who was just. He would love, yes, but he was just, and he would judge you, and he would put you in hell. So, there was always that fear of hell around every corner. I mean, fear was your constant friend. It kept you out of trouble, out of hell. And so you lived with this fear and the thought of sin and the thought of hell in your constant thinking on everything.
Yeah.
Our church did not believe in divorce. They did not believe in remarriage. If you divorced, you were doomed. you were
Right.
doomed by them. So if you remarried, then you remarried into adultery. If your husband was still living, and so you have that standing over you. So I was already going to be, condemned. But I tried so hard, to make God love me I just wanted him to love me so much. And so, I would keep praying and I would keep repenting. I would keep, just this constant terror at your spirit to want something that you just feel it is outside your reach.
Right.
I remember just, as reaching into my 60s and just wanting, so weary of the trying and the doing. And, I would get on the carpet in my living room and I would just get on my face and just plead with God, to hear me, to love me, to show me what direction, where he wanted me to go, and just be so weary of it all. My prayer began to be, God, I'm so tired of being afraid. That was exactly how I felt. I was just afraid of being put in hell.
Yeah.
As here I am, an older person. I'm a widow, and I'm still pleading with God, to accept me, to love me, to somehow, not want to condemn me.
Right.
And I just remember being in that space of being so weary. And then the bitterness began to fill in. And it just kind of, the anger began to fill me up. And anger started pouring out in just the most unopportune times. The most embarrassing times, this anger would come forth, and it became a part of me. And people would ask me, why are you so angry? And I said, I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated. It was always my excuse. I was constantly frustrated. And I searched for answers in the church. They just wanted to hit surface. I knew this was so much deeper. I didn't understand where it was seeded from. Where was it coming from? And I looked in Christian books, with Christian authors and counselors, and nobody could touch it. And that was when, I started searching for answers. That is when I brought the question to my daughter, asked her just some simple question. And she just looked at me and said, Mom, I think you're coming to the wrong tree. I think you're at the tree of knowledge and you need to be at the tree of life. And I thought, what in the world are you talking about? I don't know what that is. And she said, well, I've got this book. And she lent me her book, The Grace Walk by Stephen McVey. And I began to go through it and work through it. And I mean, that was such an eye-opener. And I thought, oh, okay, this answers a lot of questions. This is a whole new thing. This is different than the religion that I have been so invested in all these years. I mean, I know something with my religion is not working.
Yeah.
And the back of his book said, are you asking yourself, there's got to be something more to Christianity. What's going on here? And
So
that's
was this the point? Do you think this was the point at which you began to deconstruct? Because his book is really about grace, right? Coming into
it was about
grace.
Christ, and he had a lot of things in there about forgiveness and law. It hit a lot of the areas that the church was teaching that made no sense to me. And the way that he opened it up in his book, it began to make sense. And even though I didn't reconstruct, about other areas, it started opening my mind to new ideas. So it's like, I didn't really have that question, maybe I've got it all wrong yet, but it just kind of dug a little crack, in the surface of what I believed in.
Right.
And it made sense to me. It just agreed with me all over the inside. And it didn't take care of the anger or the bitterness, but it did give me a little tiny glimpse of peace. And so that started the open mind journey. And that is when Aaron said, let me introduce you to somebody I know that might be able to help you. And that's when she introduced me to you. I made my first appointment with you.
Okay.
And as you know, I took my theology into our meetings. And many times my ego, well, I only listen to certain pastors and I only, this and that. And you're like, well, Cheryl, that's just, that's not really where the answer is at, because the answer is inside of you, and, Christ living in you and your union with Christ. But I didn't understand any of that. I remember you saying things and I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. I don't understand what he's saying.
Right.
But over a period of time, then, that's your information, though not understood, begin to kind of tear down that little bit of ego that I had in my belief system. And it allowed me to ask the question, well, maybe I do have this wrong. Maybe there is something to what Scott is saying. God really loves me. He really does. I mean, I have notes, and I still do from that time, all over my apartment on all my mirrors, that says, Cheryl, I love you, God. And I would read those, and I, for about 2 years maybe, I'd read it, but I didn't really believe it. And I would go through the list: in union with Christ, I am accepted and I am forgiven and I am co-heir. I had to look upwards because I didn't understand what they meant.
Right.
And I would say them, and I would say them every day. I would go over those, and my mind just going, just knocking them out. No, 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 no. At first it was like, I can't believe this, because you're this and you're this, and there's something wrong with you. And so, you've got to be in everybody's business, and you're still, judging, and you're still doing this. And, I would get hit with all of that. And scripture, I would read my Bible, and the old teachings would just bombard my thinking. And I remember bringing scripture to you and say, well, what do you think this means? And you would share with me, and it would be totally different than what I had been taught. And I got to where I couldn't even read my Bible. It came to a point where I had to say, I've got to lay down everything I think I know. I don't know anything. And I got quiet. And instead of being out there cramming my religion at everybody, which is what I did, had an opinion. I was always right. I finally laid it down and just said, I'm just going to listen. I don't have anything to say. I don't want to have anything to say. No opinion. I don't know what I'm talking about. And the deconstruction, I think, started when I finally was able to let go of all the stuff that I thought I knew.
Yeah. What do you think were during this time, what was some of the first theological tenets, if you will, that you really started to look at and begin to deconstruct?
Yeah, I think the first thing that happened was you mentioned something about hell and about there being no hell. And this is a high tenet. That was always the threat of the church. If you sin, you go to hell.
Right.
If you didn't do things proper, or you backslid, or lost your salvation, you were doomed to hell. If you did this and this and this, you were to hell. If that threat, that Jesus could come back anytime. And if he comes back and you're not doing his work, he'll put you in hell. you had to keep doing. You had to, there was always that drive. So
Right.
when you showed me, number one, I remember you saying, God doesn't expect anything of you. And I remember taking a breath and thinking about that. And I didn't even realize I was holding my breath. And when it made sense to me, what God doesn't, he loves me and he doesn't expect anything out of me. It didn't make any difference to him whether I did or read or acted in a certain way or didn't do, or no, he would still, he loved me and didn't expect anything out of me. And when it made sense to me, it's like, oh, I just, it's just like such relief. And then when you were speaking again about hell, because I think the first 3 times, it didn't connect.
Yeah, we talked a lot about it. That was it's a major tenet for all of us, right? I mean, that was
Absolutely.
that was sort of the hammer in the hand,
Yeah, it was like all the wind went out of the religious sail, and everything started coming undone.
Yeah.
Because that was the basis of your obedience, was that fear of hell. And if you took that away, then there was nothing holding you to the belief system. Right. It just became unraveled. It unraveled. Is a good word. So I did my research on hell, and when I did my research on it and found out what you were saying was true, and it resonated with me that it was true. The first thing that came to mind was, what other things is the church teaching was I brought up on that are not true? And then I started doing research on other things.
Right.
The sinner's prayer. Oh my goodness. Created, by what? Billy Graham crusades and I grew up.
Right.
Billy Graham's crusade. He was a big teacher. He was a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
It went to hear him.
Yeah, I did too.
Several of his
as a kid
meetings. All of the stuff that was used to get us to the altar, the emotional hype, it just all began to overwhelm me.
Yeah.
And then I got angry, and I had to mourn. I know that sounds really sad to mourn, but the feeling of betrayal, that I'm in my 60s and I lived my whole life by these rigid rules, and to find out that they are not correct, they're not what Jesus was about, or God. The God that I was taught, was the angry God who killed his son, murdered him on the cross brutally, in my place, who couldn't look at me because I was sinful to start with. I was born sinful. Mm-hmm. And life just goes downhill from there. He's angry. You never know whether he's going to answer your prayer, or how much you have to do to get his attention, or how much good work. Everything that happens to you that is a blessing is because you're doing something for him, and if you don't do enough, then bad things start happening. You never know where you stand. It's that unpredictable, angry, vindictive God that brutally murdered his son in my place. And because Jesus stood in the gap for me, that God, that was the God I knew. So I was listening to Baxter Kruger teach on that sort of thing, and how God Jesus was not the cross between us and God, but Jesus actually went down into the pit and went to where I was in my sin. And that's the Jesus showing, bringing me God's love. When he started talking about a God like that, then it's like, you're totally different. I have the wrong view of you. I don't know who you are. And that was, a start of a new journey. Finding out who God was for me, who he really was, that he was a God of love, and who Jesus really was, why he came. When I read I think it's the book, Steve McVeigh's book on angry God or the love of God or something. Anyway, one of his
Beyond
books.
Beyond an Angry God.
Beyond the Angry God.
Yeah, great book.
He's talking about how it wasn't God who killed Jesus on the cross, but it was us. And I remember reading that, and it just gripped me. And I wept, that I had thought all these years that this angry God had killed Jesus on behalf, and then it ends up that it was my sin. It was me. It was men. It was us who put God on the cross. And it opened up a whole new view of who God was, and a new type of relationship with him.
This is part one of our deconstruction conversation with Cheryl Burns and her own testimony and journey that she has gone through. Next week will be part two. I hope you can join us then. Thanks so much.